This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
All right, let's be joined now by Ryan Brown, again, co-host of The Next Round here on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Ryan, I want to start with your radio show yesterday because I listened to it. You guys announced it live on air. What were the reactions that you guys got from fans when Bohannon was announced as terminated as the Alabama head baseball coach?
Well, I think surprised because I think most people, and I've got to be honest with you, I was in this group, I think most people thought this was, an isolated incident that wasn't nefarious and wasn't, some sort of, big story that somebody just let it slip that the starter wasn't going and it got to the right person and they made bets, and those max bets created an automatic stop at the MGM there in Cincinnati. And this, was nothing to see here, just move along. I don't think anybody ever dreamt that a coach was knowingly feeding information to someone in order to place bets against his team. I mean, I just don't think when this story came out, anybody thought that would be the case. It just doesn't make any sense. So I think there was a great deal of surprise at how quickly Alabama moved on Brad Bohannon, based on just that. I mean, based on the fact that I don't think anybody thought that there was any way he was involved to the point that it would require him to be terminated.
And it was confirmed by ESPN that he was in that conversation with the bettor in Cincinnati, which is just crazy to me. Now, you or one of your co-hosts, I can't remember if it was you, Jim, or Lance, made the point yesterday talking about there's something ongoing with the lawsuit of a former player. Do you think that played any part of this role of him being terminated so quickly that it kind of was on top of all this?
I mean, I don't really. So, I think he was probably going to be under review at the end of the year anyway, regardless of that lawsuit or this gambling situation. This is an Alabama team now. Now, understand, for the listeners in Arkansas, I know Arkansas baseball is a really, really big deal. They've been to Omaha, and they've been very successful. And I know a lot of Arkansas fans come down here to Birmingham for the SEC tournament. And at times, when Alabama and Auburn are playing in it, they get a lot of fans here. But on the week-to-week basis, that's just not the way baseball is in this state. It's not huge. There's not a ton of attention paid to college baseball in this state. Fans don't really come out in huge numbers until their team, goes to Omaha or plays well at Hoover. So, people aren't following baseball anywhere close to the level they're following college football or even basketball in the state. So, a story like a kid, filing a lawsuit over misuse, that would be a massive story. If a player said Brian Harsin or now, Hugh Freeze or Nick Saban did something, I mean, that story would dominate the state. Or even if it was Bruce Pearl or Nate Oates, when it's Butch Thompson or, Brad Bohannon, it's just not going to get the headline. So I don't know how many people were even aware that lawsuit existed. We had talked very little about it. So I don't know that was a flashpoint for Brad Bohannon. I just honestly think, if this Alabama team couldn't close the deal, stay about where they are in the SEC, make Hoover, make the NCAA tournament, that he was probably going to be, at the very least, on a very hot seat, if not absolutely fired at the end of this year, regardless of anything.
Ryan, I wonder about, and I ask you this because you talk to the people of Alabama every day. From the outside looking in, there's a timeline, that began about 90 days or so ago, and it's not been a really good timeline, for lack of a better way to put it, when you factor in all the things that have happened. From the outside looking in, you have to know that people are saying, what in the world's going on down there? Give me a sense, give us a sense, our audience a sense of what the people in Alabama are saying, not just about this, because this standing alone would be bad, but it wouldn't be as bad as it is when you add it up with the other things that have happened. What are the people saying about it?
Well, I do think Alabama fans are tired of it being like death by paper cuts, right? Like every time you open up Twitter, there's another headline about your program that doesn't paint it in a positive light. And, it was for Alabama fans, a very difficult And I feel like I need to say this before I even answer your question. Obviously, there was a loss of life in one of these situations. That's by far and away the most important thing. But we're discussing the sports aspect of it. So in that vein, in the sports aspect of it, it was a very difficult season for Alabama fans. In one sense, you were having maybe the best season in Alabama basketball history, regular season-wise. And then on the other hand, there was this story that continued to plague your team. There was this cloud over this team. There was your best player, who was one of the best players in the country, that, was constantly being discussed in negative light. I mean, it was tough for a lot of Alabama fans. And every day it felt like it was either something new or just more criticism on that same story. But the difference there is you were winning basketball games. So you were still able to go to the Coleman Coliseum or watch Alabama on the road and see them win games. And you were able to go to Bridgestone and see them win the SEC tournament. You were able to see them get the 1 seed. Now, they exited way too early in the Sweet 16, but still, in this situation, you're getting negative headlines, and you're not even getting any good baseball out of it. I mean, this is a team that's 9-12 in the SEC, and I get that the SEC is easily the most difficult conference in America. I completely understand that. But, you're talking about a football team that's constantly competing for the national championship, a basketball team now that is regularly competing for the SEC championship. You can handle some bad headlines when that's the case, right? It's harder to swallow the bad headlines when your team sucks on top of it. And that's where Alabama fans are now with this baseball team.
Is Greg Burns safe?
I think it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I think for now, yes, but so I think with Greg, you've got to put this in two boxes, right? I mean, so for purposes of evaluating his job, take all the negative away. There are a lot of positives there, right? I mean, he's made, by and large, he's made good hires. His programs in a lot of areas, not 100%, but a lot of areas are very successful. He's done a good job fundraising. He's trying to build a basketball arena Alabama desperately needs. If Arkansas fans have been, to Coleman Coliseum and they look at Bud Walton and Coleman Coliseum, there's an obvious difference. They need a new basketball arena, and he's doing everything in his power to get that done for Nate Oates. So all those things are really positive things. But ultimately, like any head coach or any head of an organization, if you continue to have negative things that bring bad light, not just on your athletic department, but on your academic institution, that is eventually going to trickle down to you. If Greg had made bad hires, if he hadn't hired a Nate Oates or some people like that, he would have already been gone. I think the one thing that is helping him in this situation, obviously, is that, he's got all those positives that I mentioned. He's very well liked. He's respected. He's a good face for the program, but there's still these dark clouds that just hang over Alabama athletics right now. And then it starts to affect the image of the actual academic institution. That's where things get really serious.
Ryan Brown's our guest. He co-hosts the Next Round radio show in Birmingham. He's also on TV at ABC 3340. Ryan, to Chuck's question, how has all this in the last 3 or 4 months affected Nick Saban, you think, in the football program? I know there was 2 incidents involving a football player and someone on staff. How do you think all this has affected him and how he views the athletic department?
Well, I mean, he is, and I know a lot of people don't believe this. Going back to when it appeared that he took he did a drive-by on Nate Oates in a press conference, and a lot of people made a big deal about that. He claimed that he never knew Nate Oates had said what Oates said that made it look like Nick Saban was taking a shot at him about the wrong place, wrong time comment. Nick Saban is a very insulated human being. He is not active on social media. Really, outside of recruiting, his cell phone is just an accessory. He's not a guy, that he literally, and I know that people may roll their eyes when I say this, but he's one of those guys that literally goes from his house to the Malmore building in Tuscaloosa and is in there in his own world for 8, 10, 12, 14, 18 hours, whatever the workday is. He might hit the golf course, but he's recruiting, he's watching film, he's coaching football, he's evaluating players, and that's what he does. So, if somebody walked into his office today and said, hey, they had to fire the baseball coach because of this, it literally might be the first time he's heard that. So
I believe that.
I don't know. Yeah,
I
mean
believe
that's the way
that.
he is. If you've ever been around the guy, and actually, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but he likes our show for some reason. So we've actually, we've spent some time around him, and he really is that way. It's not just some sort of facade. That's the way he operates. So he would only worry about it, honestly, to the extent it hampered him from doing his job, and to this point, it hasn't. So I think he won't. Look, I think here's the thing I would say about him, though. It only helps him for all the programs around him to be successful, right? I mean, he wants basketball to be successful because he brings football recruits to basketball games. They come and he wants them to see a great atmosphere. It doesn't hurt him for baseball to be successful. It's just a positive light on the athletic department. But if something like this is happening and it's not affecting his recruiting or his ability to field the team, I don't know that he's going to spend a whole lot. He talks all the time about ignoring external factors and outside distractions. And I just don't think he lets these things like this affect his day to day.
Ryan, I want to ask you a little more about Alabama football. I've had this thought before, and I've been dead wrong. I've been the only one that the dynasty was over. It was crumbling. It was coming to an end. And
you're not alone in that one.
Yeah.
People love to write that one. Yeah, a lot of people have been wrong there.
Tell me why it's not over. Tell me why LSU's not going to win the West. Tell me why their quarterback issues aren't going to take over this season. Tell me why Alabama is going to go on a revenge tour, beat Georgia in the SEC championship, and win the national title.
Well, I can't tell you that they are going to do all those things, but I will tell you the reason the dynasty is not over is Nick Saban is still there. And he has not lost his fastball. I mean, the guy is the youngest 71-year-old I've ever seen. Now, look, he's got probably as big a challenge consistently as he's ever had. Georgia is not going anywhere. Brian Kelly is an elite coach, in my opinion. He will have LSU consistently challenging him in the West. So to start with the question about the West, I think it comes down to the fact that LSU played in Bryant-Denny. And of late, that has been a really difficult place for them to win games. They've got the one win since the game of the century there in 2011 at Bryant-Denny Stadium. That is it. And that was the Ed Orgeron National Championship team. So you start there, as that game is in Bryant-Denny, so Alabama would obviously have an advantage there. I think the question, about Alabama, obviously, is going to be a quarterback. I think they can be better defensively. Pete Golding went to Ole Miss, the defensive coordinator, and they replaced with Kevin Steele, who is an older school guy that is kind of more in line with what Nick Saban likes to do. He'll probably be more aggressive defensively. Tommy Rees is a question mark. He's the offensive coordinator that we just did not see a whole lot out of Notre Dame. When we did see it, it wasn't fantastic. And now he's brought in a quarterback that he likes from Notre Dame, which tells you he didn't like what he saw in the Alabama quarterback room with the four quarterbacks Alabama had there. So I do think you have some natural questions about that. Alabama's not as elite at receiver as they have been recently. I will say the place where I think Alabama is going to improve the most this year is at offensive line. I think you'll see a noticeable difference between what Alabama's offensive line has become over the last 2 or 3, 4 years to what it will be this year. I think it's not going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but I think they can get back to a little more of a ground game that is physical and more consistent, which would only help a young, inexperienced quarterback.
BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right down to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV. BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.